Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Understories with me, your host, Lindsay Fowler. I've been working in creative business for around 20 years, and the aim of this podcast is to bring you interviews with engaging and interesting creative entrepreneurs about the ups and downs of earning money from their creativity alongside building great businesses. In this episode, I speak to Elle Bytautaite of Studio Elle. She's an architect who set up a practice about a year ago, and she's based in Surrey in the UK. In this conversation, we talk about the ride that is the first year of business. Elle is incredibly thoughtful, ambitious, and a refreshing voice in the world of creative entrepreneurship. It was really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it too. This is our first recording of Understories, so I hold my hands up and say I'm a little green at this whole thing. But you can't get good at anything without being willing to be bad at it, so thanks for your patience as we find our groove. Lastly, before we get started, if you like this podcast, please give us a rating or review wherever you're watching or listening to this. Tell a friend about us, and don't forget to subscribe so that you get notified about future episodes, which will be coming out every Tuesday. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Elle Bytautaite. So, welcome to Understories, Elle Bytautaite. Is that right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Elle. It's really great to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about your studio. So I know about what you do. You do high-end residential design based in Surrey, but can you just tell us a little bit more about your practice and how you got started and the story thus far?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. It's my first podcast, so we're still experimenting and trying. So I'm Elle, and I run a studio called Studio Elle, and I tend to focus on the high-end residential sector, and that just stems from my experience. So I come from the Notting Hill sort of bespoke turnkey design practice that I was in for eight years, and I decided to take the plunge and leave in January last year. So I'm coming up to the first year anniversary
Wow,
of the studio, which is, I guess it's already quite an achievement, but I think we just kind of take it for granted a little bit. We just get so worked up in small things. But yeah, so I took my experience of sort of Notting Hill, south of France, very bespoke, beautiful houses and the customer services that went with it, and decided to branch out into my home, into my home county of Surrey, and now slightly more into the surrounding counties.
And so, why did you get into design and architecture? What was it about it that really sparked your interest?
I was always really creative, but surprisingly, I knew that I wanted to be an architect from the age of about 7. I was so clear. There was no question about it. I just went to my parents and I said, I'm going to be an architect. And they said, okay. Like, no questions asked. We didn't know any architects growing up. So there weren't any role models.
Do you know how you came across the profession, like, as a 7-year-old? Did you just hear someone talking about architecture and like, that's what I want to be?
I doubt it. I mean, I came from such a humble sort of immigrant background where we weren't around those sort of people. So no one was really talking about architecture. But I think the first validation came from my uncle, who was a structural engineer, and they were living in the big town and we were living, in the countryside. And then we used to have really good conversations with him. And he just said, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I'm not sure. I really like drawing, but I also like all the academically challenging subjects as well. And he said, well, you can be an architect. And I thought, can I? Oh, okay. So
wow,
I guess I'm going to be an architect. So.
It's almost amazing, because I think if you have someone who can articulate what you're interested in, then you realize that it's a profession that must be, I mean, it just must be so exciting as a 7-year-old being like, I can do all the things I want to do. And it exists. The thing I want to do exists. That's amazing. Because most kids, at 7 want to be like, I don't know, like a cowboy astronaut. You know what I mean? There's that kind of combination there.
Yeah. So I think it just shows the fact that you need to have maybe not so much role models, but role models as well, but someone just kind of validating you and saying you can actually do what you want to do and you can achieve anything you want to achieve.
Now, I mean, so you said you started your studio in January last year. What was the catalyst for starting then?
Very good question. I actually had to take some time to reflect and think about exactly why I wanted to take the plunge. And the one word that I came back with after a bit of soul searching was independence. I think I was just, I really wanted that independence to do what I was already doing. I actually really loved my job, and I was in a great position, really nice company, really well looked after, some amazing projects and really nice clients who were really grateful and kind and polite. But I wanted to do exactly what I was doing, but on my own terms. And once that floodgate opened, there was no way of stopping it.
Can you say more about that? What do you mean?
I think for so many years, I never really saw myself as someone that would run a business. Never. If you asked me that question about even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have said, you must be mad. I'm so happy working for someone else. I just do what I have to do, and then I don't have to take the extra pressure. I had no ambition of really doing it. And I don't know how it changed so suddenly, but that sort of longing for independence and being able to weave work into life a little bit more, because I was spending so much time commuting. So I live in Surrey, and then I was traveling to Notting Hill, so sort of an hour and a half each way, so 3 hours a day minimum. And I reached a point where I thought, I want to live life on my terms, and I don't want, I love where I live, and I don't want to have to leave just to, function on a daily basis. And that just opened sort of the floodgate where I was like, maybe I can do this.
But I mean, so when you say independence, it was independence for yourself, but also independence for as a lifestyle, to give you that sort of freedom to well, also you getting back more of your day and things like that. So you work from home now? Is that working as well? Do you feel like, actually, that's the question. Do you feel like you've gotten more independent now that you've set up your own studio? Did you get what you wanted a year in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I started off working from home thinking that's what I want. Actually, about 6 months in, I realized that I think I need to leave the house every now and then.
There's something about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually working in a co-working space, which I started back in September. So it's only, I've been there for 2 months. But that has been absolutely transformative. It has, to my motivation, to my productivity, to just general inspiration. It's been amazing. So I came back today just for the recording because there's still a bit of a building site there. So I needed some peace and quiet. But have I achieved independence? Yeah, absolutely. I think I have. But there are differing degrees of independence, I guess. There's, the financial, then there's the location wise. It's such a broad subject in a sense.
Yeah. What about creatively? Do you feel like you found your independence that way?
Yeah. I think I was able to search for it in a sense and distill it, who I am as a designer and as a professional. Because when you work in an office and for someone else, you're working by their rules and what they're trying to achieve. And it turns out I'm not too dissimilar from what I was doing. I actually, turns out I really enjoy it. And not that I'm only drawing from my experience, but it seems like that is genuinely who I am. And I like that, the sort of the work and the style that I was involved in. Which again, I didn't foresee. I thought I would maybe go slightly different route, and then I came back to that. So it's constantly changing.
Is that down to the nature of the projects that have come in, or is it more about? Was it an active choice to kind of stick with what you liked already?
No, I think leaving again, if you asked me that question this time last year, I would have said, no, I want to do something different. I want to maybe not go into the public sector so much, but I think I was looking for something slightly different. Maybe in a sense there was sort of like, oh, I'm kind of done working for, the Notting Hill sort of type.
Yeah.
But I think I confused my dissatisfaction for just general sort of dissatisfaction with the situation itself, where I was so done with commuting and all the other aspects of life, not necessarily the work that I was doing. But at the time, I think I saw everything sort of like blend into one, and thinking like, well, Notting Hill is to blame for all of it.
Like it's that place. Yeah. But then, but it wasn't that actually in the end. So then, from what's been the most surprising thing that you found about your business and starting the studio? What's been the thing that you kind of weren't expecting?
Just how much work goes into it.
Yeah.
Just how much work goes into it. And I was so naive going into it, thinking, well, you just set up on your own, you do what you're good at, and people come to you.
Yeah.
Breaking news. People don't just come to you. You need to go and find them.
Yeah, indeed. And how did you address that? Did you go and find clients? I mean, I remember when we talked about this a bit before, you said you kind of meeting people in the community, kind of trying to sort of do a bit more kind of local outreach. Was that the main focus?
Oh, I'm still trying and I'm still experimenting, but I think I'm doing everything. I'm sort of wearing all the hats and trying to constantly brainstorm different ways of reaching out to people, all the different PR campaigns and marketing and all the words I thought I would never have to use because, that's for business people.
Yeah, right.
I'm just an architect. I'm just a creative.
Yeah. Someone said to me, it doesn't really matter what you do. It's all just really down to marketing and sales. And I was like, man, it's so true. And it's kind of disappointing. But then when you hear it, you're like, oh, but then if I can get my head around those things, then it makes the sale of the creative act much easier, right? You can make time for it in a different way, right? So I don't know. Marketing sales is not a natural habitat for creatives, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. And I think even the word sales is just it's like a dirty word in the industry. No one uses that word. Like I still sort of like cringe a little bit when someone says it, but then you're like, but that's what you do. That's how you pitch. That's how you talk to people, how you find clients. But no one wants to admit that, and no one wants to like use the terminology.
Well, no, because I mean, everyone associates it with like a used car salesman, but that's the thing is, I think sales is not just selling an item, right? It's selling an idea. It's selling some sort of innovation. It's not. It can take different forms. So being comfortable with it is kind of it's actually understanding what it is, as opposed to just assuming that it is just trying to sort of make a buck or, trying to, shiest, can't think of the right word, but, like swindle somebody out of some money. But do you find though that, I think we touched on this before when we spoke, was like, do you find that selling your creativity is a difficult thing to get your head around?
Yes, absolutely. I think especially in our field, in our industry, where we train for so many years to be great professionals, but at no point we are trained to talk about what we do and the value that we bring, and the fact that we have 8-9 years education under our belts, plus all the working experience as well. So it's incredibly hard to sell yourself when you're so uncomfortable with having to talk about what am I going to offer you in exchange for your fees. Incredibly difficult.
How have you gotten around it?
With a lot of tension and a lot of being outside the comfort zone. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm still learning. I think you will probably always be learning.
Yeah.
But I think in those cases, you need to look outside of your industry and go, okay, so how are people going about it? And again, not as you mentioned, not going down the route of, insurance brokers and car sales, but like, how do we do this with style and elegantly, and with self-respect and respect for the client. So learning from others, I think, is what I'm establishing.
What industries did you look at then in that case when you were looking outside of architecture on how to sell services?
No industries in particular, but I am a big listener of podcasts. So I have some of my favorite podcasts, especially the ones where they interview, business owners and entrepreneurs that have been operating for a really long time and have built really successful businesses. And just learning from their stories, I found was the most useful thing to do.
Have you ever listened to, was it How I Built This with Guy Raz? Have you listened to that one? I love that podcast. He wrote a great book about that. It was all about, it was fantastic reading. It was, he interviewed all those people and they, talked about the mistakes they made, with the intent that, all of us in this sort of entrepreneurial journey don't make the same mistakes. But the reality is we're all going to make different mistakes, but it's just good to know that we're not alone in the mistake making, I guess, is how I'm thinking about it. But
absolutely. I actually have that book. And another really useful thing that I'm learning was in the co-working space, just having the conversation with people around me. So, there are photographers, there are people in tech, it's such a variety of different people. And when you just speak to them very organically, you get to sort of, learn from one another. So that has been a tremendous help.
What are your plans for the studio? Where do you want to take it?
Oh, another good question. I don't know where, okay, maybe I do know, to an extent, but I'm also seeing, how it will grow organically. But I quite enjoy operating on my own. So I have no active plans to bring someone to do it with me, I don't think. And I think that goes back to the independency conversation that we had earlier. I really like the autonomy to be able to make decisions and not have to justify or discuss them for too long with someone. Less about, the actual design and, the daily of, the architectural projects, but more of the sort of the trajectory of the studio, how I want to look, where I want to go, the clients that I would want to take on. I really like doing that on my own, but you never know. I think at some point it will grow a little bit, but I would want to keep it very small, maybe have a very small office. And I already in my mind, I know exactly how it's going to look visually, on the little high street. Oh yeah. It's so architectural.
I love that.
But I have that image in my head.
So little high street practice, in Surrey somewhere. So it's a local place. People can come in, have a chat, and you can come see you.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, absolutely. So I have 2 locations already in mind, and they're tiny little sort of villages in Surrey, right? Picture the traditional little buildings, and then the Studio Elle, who has a little umbrella with the black and white stripes, and everything is painted white, and it's very Scandinavian looking, and the projects are neatly pinned up. I just have that such a concrete image in my head of what I want that space to look like. But I see such value in people being able to see that, because I think as a professional we have we have never been on the high street to start with, so we were never sort of customer-facing profession. And I see tremendous value in that, especially more and more that I'm surrounded by people who are not architects by choice nowadays. I see that they have no sort of understanding of what we do and how do we find one, what does one look like. And I feel like if they were just walking past your studio, they go, oh, wow, okay, I can kind of see what's happening here. Maybe I can stop and have a chat.
Is that part of your process then when working with clients, is kind of bringing them into the behind the scenes of what you're doing so that they can understand more about what actually you're doing for them? You're not keeping them sort of at arm's distance and then just presenting them with some ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that was one of the really conscious choices that I made at the beginning. The way I work as an architect, and again, it probably just stems from my experience of the really high-end sector where the fees were incredibly high, but we just the customer service and the experience that we gave the clients was, hand holding them through everything. There was no, limited revisions and, how much time you've spent or like, oh, pay an extra fee for this. No. Like you charged very well, but then you were with them every step of the way. And I really like that. And that's something that I want to bring forward and focus on in my own practice. But that means educating them about exactly what I'm doing, how much time goes into everything, making sure the communication is incredibly clear and very frequent. So I say that I'm designing the buildings with them, not for them. So at the end of the day, I don't have much of the sort of like agenda as an architect. Like I have a style, I have the knowledge of what works, what doesn't work, but I'm interested in working with them. It's their house at the end of the day. It's not my house. I will have the chance to to do things how I want. But so absolutely I want to educate them and bring them into my world first.
Have you worked with clients before now that have enjoyed that process? Are they kind of surprised at how open you are, or do they welcome the fact that you don't just keep coming back cap in hand for fees and things like
that? They probably don't have much experience to compare it with someone else. Again, because as a profession, I think it's such a small minority of people that have the luxury of working with an architect. So they can't compare apples for apples. So it's really hard to say.
Yeah, so you're probably the first architect they worked with, so they're going to be their first sort of experience with the profession. Yeah, and hopefully last, because they're going to want to stay in their house forever, kind of thing, right?
and the bar is going to be so high.
Yeah, exactly. So what has been? I appreciate, because you're coming up on a year now, right? Is that right? You said it's coming.
Yeah.
So what's been the biggest highlight so far now within your first year of practice? Because the first year is really quite something, isn't it? It's a full deep dive into everything, and you're selling architecture, but it's just so much more than that. And as you said, you have to wear about 1 million different hats. But what have been some of the highlights since you started so far?
I think there was no one big highlight, but the entire year, looking back, has been made out of small sort of milestones and what at the moment might seem as very insignificant achievements, but actually they add up to so much. So sometimes you have to pause and sort of say, okay, what have I done? What has happened? All of these small things, which are minor celebrations, and I still celebrate them the same way I would if I signed a huge project. I'm just like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah.
So all of these things, and the things that have happened, and I think it's enough to celebrate. I had 4 magazine articles. The talk at the RIBA next week, the podcast. I think I had 6 or 7 clients so far. So all of these, relatively small things, but when you look at it like as a list, and I'm going to do that in January, I actually want to sit down and write out like numbers and sort of everything, like a list. It's still a lot. A lot has been done in a year.
Yeah. I think we forget that as well. It's so easy to get stuck in the day-to-day, isn't it? And not really pull yourself back and take more of a bird's eye view. It's like you have to, I think as a founder, you kind of have to oscillate between the macro and the micro constantly, and being able to kind of step back and say, wow, some really great things happen, but then go back into it and then back out again. But I think it's our predisposition, I think generally, is to be in the day-to-day, right? It's like you want to be doing the work a lot of the time, but it's like you have to consciously step back and be like, okay, this is great. We've done all these cool things. Okay, what's the next thing? I love the idea of writing things down every January and saying, okay, what are we going to do? Do you write down goals for what you want to do for the year? Do you think that long-term in advance?
In general, yeah. I think with a business, it was slightly different because everything is so new. You're sort of going, but what's a realistic thing? I can't write down that I'm going to dominate the UK prime residential market by 2024.
This used to say it could happen, right?
But that's not my goal.
Right.
But so many of these small things add up and lead to those big things. I think that's why we can't forget or underplay their value, because that's what I'm learning. You have to do so much behind the scenes, and so much of what seemed like, oh, it's so, it's just such a small thing, it's just that one article. But what I'm finding is that, that one article comes out and then someone calls you 7 months later and go, oh, I saw you in the magazine, I have a great project. And you go,
Yeah.
everything, like all of these things lead to something else, and you just never know which door is going to open when and because of what. So much work happens without anyone seeing it, you knocking on doors and you approaching people and creating all those opportunities, without really knowing where it's going to take you, but just hoping it will take you somewhere.
It's almost like the compound effort is the thing, isn't it? It's like planting these little seeds, and then some will sprout and some won't. But it's the consistency of sprouting the little of planting the seeds to see what kind of comes back, right? I mean, it's not, it's, as you said in the beginning, it's like you expect people to come and find you, but that's not the thing. It's you have to go out and jazz hands and say, hi, I'm here. Maybe not in a jazz handsy way, but you have to go out and sort of put yourself out there, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do. We talked, I think one of my, as you know, from my point of view, the thing I'm always really interested in is that overlap between the commercial and the creative, right? And how those things touch, especially for creative entrepreneurs, because it's such a pull. It's such an awkward kind of balance. How have you dealt with that? Because it is just you. And if the desire is to stay independent and you, there will always be this kind of sort of balancing act between being able to do the creative work that you love and then kind of focusing on the commercial side of things. How do you balance those two things?
I think they go hand in hand. Without the commercial aspect, there would be no creative work. And that's why I think I was quite naive going into it, thinking the creative definitely outweighs everything else and the commercial. But it doesn't. I think it's probably 80 and 20, the balance at the moment. There's so much of the commercial sort of, and when we say commercial, like I assume we're talking about the PR and the marketing and, networking and all like the business building blocks.
Yeah.
And there's so much of it. No one tells you how much of it you have to do and just how uncomfortable you have to feel most of the time before something happens. Everyone just goes, well, I've done this project and that was the making of the studio. And you go, why is no one talking about how we got that project? Why is no one saying that?
Yeah, right. Because we were saying before, it's like no one actually talks about where they get work from, especially when they're first starting out. And so you're saying, oh, my rich uncle gave me a project, or I've actually had to go and graft and find the projects myself because I wanted to do this. How did you, because I know if you left in January, you decided to do this. Did you have a project that you could leave to go and do your studio from, or did you leave and then think, okay, right, got to find some projects? What was the balance there?
I took a complete leap of faith, and I had nothing lined up. I had no one waiting for me, no rich uncle willing to to give me a house in Ibiza commission. So it was all just, right, okay, where do we start? We start from the beginning. We build a website. We start to create, our Instagram, our LinkedIn, all of these little like small things. So I started from nothing and with no one waiting for me, with their fees kind of like, come.
Yeah. God, that's incredible. I think there are very few people that launch studios without a project in the bag. So, it's commendable that you took that leap. That's incredible. You should be very proud of that. It's really good. So I think my last question really is, what does success look like for you? How does success play out for Studio Elle in the future?
I think it's everything I probably mentioned at the beginning. So it's staying independent. So being able to make the decisions on your own in terms of where you want to go, who you want to work with, being able to say no to the projects that don't line up with with your values and your long-term vision. And I'm not sure I want to say growth because I'm not sure I do want to grow. Like I have no big ambition to say, oh, I want my office to be 20 people, because to me, it's not about that. And they're not the projects for, but, I have no aim to go into the big sort of commercial or public sector. So I'm very happy working on incredible, sort of Surrey housing stock on some one-off houses with some really lovely clients, and just giving
Yeah.
them such a bespoke and tailored package of work, and just doing that. And if it takes me somewhere else, like, I don't know, New York or some other glamorous place, then let's see where it takes me.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about growth, though. I mean, growth doesn't just have to be people. It can be reputation. It can be financial. You could just, it doesn't, I think we hear growth in this industry and we think, oh, we have to become a team of 25. And then all of a sudden we create a beast that's this thing that we have to feed. And then we end up taking projects we don't want to. And so everyone wants to stay really small. But I think that's the thing, is that it's how we position what growth looks like, right? So for you, it could be a team of 5, but be, doing some incredible projects, highly exclusive. It doesn't have to be 40 people. So it's kind of, I think that's the what's the word? The story I think that we hear a lot within, because there's micro practices, there's small practices, there's medium, and then you get into like the huge ones, but they don't mean anything anymore. And especially with technology as well, smaller projects can do bigger projects, so smaller practices can do bigger projects and things like that. So I feel like being a small practice at the moment is growth is slightly undefined, do you know?
It is, and I think we get to define what that progress means to each and one of us, because, as you said, to someone that might be scale, to other people that might be fees, and I think to me it's quality, actually. Like, I just really want to work on the quality and the craftsmanship, and establish a network of amazing people that you're surrounded with, to know who does the best stonework, who does, and I want to have clients that appreciate that. So now that I'm talking about it, I think I am distilling it a little bit more. It's actually the sort of the caliber of a client that I'm trying to attract is probably the ultimate goal, because I want people that really appreciate and understand and value what you do. And they're willing to pay for it. They have a means to pay for it, but they want to do it collaboratively. So probably, going in that direction.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? Brilliant briefs, brilliant clients, brilliant budgets. If you can find them and be clear on it. That is it, isn't it? But it is, I think that is the challenge, isn't it? It's because I think if so many people do want those things, it's how do you attract, because inevitably there will be a crossover from another studio that maybe you guys want to attract the same clients. So it's like, how do you get them to come to you versus the other person? And everyone's playing this game. So but I go back to this thing that I think there's enough for everyone. I don't think that competition should be something that we worry about. If we're doing the thing that we want to be doing and we're saying the things and we have the messaging clear, it's like we're hoping that you're going to, attract the right people that way. But yeah, I had one other question for you, which was, what challenges have you faced in your business and how have you overcome them? But I think I might change that question in a slightly different way, because I think maybe some people listening would be thinking about starting their own practice, or maybe just fresh into it. What would you say is one of the biggest challenges for the first year for you? And what would you have done differently?
I don't think I would have done anything differently.
Okay.
Maybe some of the tasks that I was doing at the beginning, I could have done whilst I was still employed. So, things like creating your website, getting an accountant, getting everything set up.
Yeah.
I think I could have done that, weekends, evenings, whilst you still have a safety blanket.
Yeah.
But I think you then have to evaluate who you are as a person, because there's a very fine line between being comfortable, and that's where I was very comfortable in my position, and it was, you kind of know that you want to do something, but then you go, but it's kind of good here, so I'm just going to stay.
Yeah.
And then being that person that, just jumps off a bridge, which I ended up being, just kind of cutting my losses and being like, okay, I'm just going to have to make it happen. I have X amount of savings and I need to bring in people because
Yeah.
the money is going to run out.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of sort of soul searching and personal development that needs to happen before you make the step to understand how risk averse are you, what you're willing to put on the line for this. And they're really uncomfortable conversations with yourself.
They really are. I mean, I always feel like if people actually understood the entrepreneurial journey, I feel like if people actually knew what it was going to be like, they probably wouldn't have done it. But yet we get into it and then we love it and we're like, oh, well, I'm ruined now. I can't go back and work for somebody. I can't. I could never go back and work in a practice now. I couldn't, because it's the independence, the freedom to work for yourself is so fantastic, right? But it's also the thing about building something for yourself, which you can't replicate,
It is, but the pros and cons are so different. I get asked that question a lot now, from family, from friends, from other people that are kind of hoping or maybe wishing or toying with the idea of setting up their own thing. They go, but it must be so much better, right? And you go, it's just very it's pros and cons are so wildly different, but again, it's not comparing apples for apples because,
so that's true. I'll
one
give you
is
that.
not necessarily better than the other.
No.
Would I want to go back to working for someone else? No. And I hope I won't have to, but you never know.
Yeah, of course.
But the highs are high and lows are very low when you're running your own thing. That's what I'm learning.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to digest a lot of the time,
It really is. I think, when we spoke before, it was like the idea that if just maybe being able to maintain sort of more of an equilibrium between the highs and lows would be the kind of ideal, what is it, homeostasis kind of elements, as opposed to just, but I think maybe the more you get into it, I don't know for you if this has been this way, but I think now I know that when the highs are happening, that the lows are going to come too. And so I'm kind of more prepared for it, as opposed to being shocked when I'm like on the floor being like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. This is killing me. Versus, when you're on the high being like, yeah, this is amazing. You kind of think, oh, okay, I'm going to probably come out of these doldrums, but also when I'm at the peak, it's probably going to go down again. So you can kind of try and sort of mitigate against the shock when you're in either one, right?
I hope you learn how to navigate a lot of these things, but when it's your first year, which it was for me, everything seems like this is the end of the world, or I'm gonna start looking at job adverts. I mean, I have I have looked at job adverts probably about 15 times in the last year because because you go, okay, well, if this is not going to work, what am I going to do? But then again, you do that soul searching circle where you go, okay, I can take the money and go back to my old life.
Yeah.
But I think I will resent myself and resent that paycheck so much, knowing you started something and you haven't quite finished it. And I knew that until I reached the rock bottom, and rock bottom being, money running out.
Yeah.
No way to pay the mortgage, and that is it. Then of course you go and work for someone else. But
sure,
I had to tell myself to don't jump to these conclusions, because there's no real reason, and your mind wants you to, because all the safety mechanisms are activated and you are fighting for survival. Your mind is like, I haven't done this before, this is all new, overwhelming, let's just go back to the safety blanket. But then you think about that you will be really hating the fact that you gave up. So it's like, it's not an option. I'm not giving up until I really, really have to. If that happens now.
Yeah. Oh, no, I get that completely. It kind of reminds me, one more question though, is that, when you're saying you have to kind of do the soul searching, what's the role of like those core foundational elements of a business? That are those what you're talking about, sort of the values that you have, the sort of the purpose or mission behind what you're trying to achieve? Are those the things that you go back to when you're kind of, why am I doing this? This is a nightmare. Or what is that? What role does that soul searching take for you? Or what does that look like? Sorry, is more what I'm asking.
I think it's going back to that original sort of pros and cons list that you made before you took the plunge to start your own business, and to remind yourself of all the reasons why you did leave your previous life behind, and why you made this jump. So for me, it was that independence. So, if I go back now and decide to take the paycheck from someone else, I trade off my independence. And that is the trade that I'm not willing to make at this point. So it's reminding yourself, maybe not so much of, your core sort of values where you want to go, because you're still growing and developing them. So for me, I don't know what my mission is. And I think mission is quite a big statement in business. I think the way I see business and life is like one and one. I don't want to have, work and life balance. Yes, it sounds glamorous. There is no such thing.
There's no such thing. Yeah.
There isn't, because if you really do what is a part of you, it is life. It's just life. And
yeah, it's just another form of life, isn't it? It's just,
yeah. But I think we are able to say that because this is our life, because our, Studio Elle is Elle. If it was Studio Tom and I was Elle, then then it is a work-life balance, because I'm not a Tom.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think that I've also kind of come to the conclusion. When I first started working as a consultant, I was always get into this thing about like, oh, you need to define who you are and where you want to get to and blah, blah, blah. I was like really passionate about that. And over the last few years, I've realized that through my own experience of this is the first few years of running a business is really about testing and trialing and trying to figure out what you believe, what you stand for, what you want out of your practice or what out you want out of your business. It's not helpful, I think, when people are like, your first year in, they're like, what's your niche? What's your mission? Where are you trying to get to? Because it is overwhelming. It feels too much. And also I feel like you can't answer that question for a good few years in, like at least, because how are you supposed to know? You have to, as they say, you have to kiss a lot of frogs. You have to kind of figure out like what clients you want to work with, what kind of projects you want to be doing, what kind of things that, what's the service that you're offering actually is. And to be forced to kind of define it so early on, I think is really difficult. But I think even, all the sort of the top, the consultants are always like, oh yeah, the importance of niching, or, you're just like, I'm only like 2 years in. I don't know what my niche is. I just got to say yes to everything because I'm trying to figure out, I got to make some money as well. There's also the sort of the practicalities of it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I think the niche word used to come up like over and over and over at the beginning. And as you said, like the world is bombarding you with these messages to like, to really find and narrow down what it is that you do. And I mentioned this to you before, but I think I went through about like 3 iterations of my website and my sort of like my visual language and my messaging of, who am I? But more importantly, who I want to attract. So my aspiration. So a lot of people, they put out what they've done, but that doesn't necessarily align with where they're trying to go. And it doesn't resonate with the people that they're trying to bring in as their clients.
Yeah.
So I think I almost reversed the formula without understanding it. And I focused so much on kind of curating the studio to the people that I think would be my ideal clients and what would speak to them and how would they get attracted. So that was my way of finding my niche, because as I said, when I left my Notting Hill life, I said, I'm not going to be doing the high end things anymore.
What were you going to do? What were you thinking of doing?
Oh, it's going to sound so funny, but I thought design must be accessible to everyone. And it's a grand statement and beautiful. If someone can make it happen, please go ahead. But as you said, the realities of life and having to take a salary come in, and then you go, I was getting really, I think we laughed about this before, but I got a really strange phone call one day where someone said, so I have this extension, it doesn't quite work, the bins don't work, and you help me pick out new bins. And I was thinking, what made them think that you call an architect to, you know, to pick, to help them, you know, design or pick out their bins? So I think that was a big moment where I was like, I don't think I'm conveying what I actually do if people feel like that's what, you know.
But I think just being able to step back and ask yourself that question is an edge, if I'm really honest, because I think most people would have just been like, no, that's not what we do. Bye. But actually, when you get asked that question, you're like, well, hang on a minute. I'm getting this like, what am I putting out there that attracts these types of people? And actually seeing that you have a proactive opportunity, you have an opportunity to be proactive in who you're attracting, as opposed to just being like, oh, well, that's, you know, they just Googled architect and I came up, and so they'll think I can do their bin, you know, the bin store or whatever. It's not, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's as common as you might think. Like,
it's, you know, it's an anecdote for sure, and that will go down in Studio Elle history books. But you are right. I think it was such a light bulb moment for me to think, clearly I'm not communicating my education, my experience, my, you know, my fees and my value. That's the most important thing, because, you know, so that phone call, and then there was another email where someone sort of asked me to draw something for free, and I was thinking, instead of just dismissing them, which, you know, I'm sure, you know, there are lots of strange, you know, calls and emails to every office, but instead of kind of being like, oh, whatever, what's happening here, it doesn't matter. It was really kind of like, it's weird how I clung onto that, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to curate it. And I use the word curation very purposely, because it is like actually, you know, an art gallery. I'm going to curate a facade which only resonates with the people that I am trying to attract. So if someone is looking for someone to do something for free, because clearly they don't understand, you know, how much, you know, you are valued, they will kind of go, whoa, you know, this looks way too serious and way too nice. But the people who are looking for that, it will speak to them. So it's such a hard exercise. And it's an exercise which makes you quite uncomfortable, because the imposter syndrome is so real.
Well, what you mean is, if you don't put in like loads of work up, that maybe people won't find you. So when you say curating, is actually paring back what you put out there. Is that what you mean? Or what do you mean by imposter syndrome?
No, so imposter syndrome to then sort of justify the way that, you know, your studio looks, and then you're sort of going, oh, but a lot of it is aspirational. Even though, you know, your experience justifies it. But you're still sort of, you're still trying to find your feet, and you're slightly uncomfortable. So yeah.
Well, I think imposter syndrome just never ends. But I think I read somewhere that like 70% of the population has imposter syndrome. So if we know that everyone else pretty much around us has it. So it kind of makes it feel a little bit more like solidarity, that we're all trying to figure it all out, or whatever have you. I don't know. Well, listen, we've been going now for a little while, so I'll let you go. But where can people find you if they want to follow your work and see more of what you do?
So they can find me on Instagram at studio.elle.architecture. I treat my Instagram as a sort of brainstorm of my own work, all the references that I use. So it's a nice visual logbook. And then for the curated website, they can head over to studioellearchitecture.com.
Cool. Oh, well, amazing. Thank you, Elle. It's been really nice talking to you. Thank you for being so open and honest about your experience so far.
No problem. Thank you. Just cut me out. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to bounce some energy around and share the story.
Yeah, it's been great. So, I'm going to put stop. Thanks again to Elle for taking the time to join me on Understories. I'm sure you could hear how much fun we had in the conversation. Once again, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, all those sorts of things. We'll be dropping a new episode every Tuesday, and until then, be well. Understories was produced by Cloudfields and Kieran Fowler, music by Aves, branding by Joe Jones. See you next week.